Talk faith, talk pain, talk pride, talk father, talk sons by our side. Every story that they said was weak, you gon' hear us talk on. Black men speak, turn it up, let the truth run deep. Say it, from the barbershop chair to the back row seat. If you feel what we feel, then repeat, Black men speak.
Well, welcome to the Black Men Speak podcast, the best podcast that highlights ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Keith Dent. And, we bring truth to our conversations that are often held in silence. So normally we do great feel-good stories. But today's episode is going to be a very deep one. And it's a story of no parent really wants to tell, and too few people are prepared to hear. So if you're someone that is maybe lost a child or know someone very close to you that's lost a child, please, if that upsets you, make sure you have tissues in hand, because it's going to be just a very transformative discussion today. And I'm just so thankful that the brother we're going to have on today is courageous enough to tell his story. And so today we're going to talk about neonatal encephalopathy. And it's more than a medical term. It's a condition that affects newborn brain function right after birth, most often due to oxygen deprivation. It touches families suddenly, profoundly, and without warning. It occurs approximately 2 to 9 out of every 1,000 full-term births worldwide. Of those infants who develop moderate to severe neonatal encephalopathy, roughly 40 to 60% will either die by age 2 or live with lasting neurological disability. In our story today, it was less than that. Across the globe, hundreds of thousands of infants die in their first weeks of life from complications related to postpartum brain injury. Neonatal encephalopathy, I'm going to have to get that right, is among leading contributors to newborn death and lifelong impairment. But here's the part nobody really talks about. While the medical system fights to save fragile lives, what happens to the parents, especially Black fathers who face loss and grief in the aftermath? Too often, strength is assumed and support disappears. The clinical charts close, the doctors move on, but the grief does not. So in today's episode of Black Men Speak, we're sitting with Ryan K. Brown Jr., who confronted the loss head on and discovered how unprepared our systems are to care for grieving families once the hospital lights dim. What began as a medical crisis exposed deeper emotional and systemic gaps where strength was assumed, silence followed, and support was scarce. Through his grief, he and his wife co-founded the Andreas Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing research, education, and compassionate support for families affected by pregnancy and infant loss. Ryan's work is deeply shaped by personal experience. And after the loss of his son, Andreas Darius Brown, Ryan confronted firsthand the emotional, medical, and systemic gaps that too often leave grieving families unsupported. So what began as a journey through profound grief became a commitment that families navigating loss are met with understanding, resources, and meaningful change rather than silence. So today's conversation is about fatherhood, grief, and the quiet burden Black men are often expected to carry alone. We talk about what happens after the doctors leave, how grief shows up in the body and mind, and why compassion can't end at discharge. It's about telling the truth, naming the gaps, and creating space for Black men to be seen, supported, and heard. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right this evening. How are you?
And I know you heard me say before, but I appreciate you being courageous and sharing your story today.
Thank you. Absolutely. Happy to be here and to talk about it.
So, you lost your son, Andreas Darius Brown. Briefly, talk about. You could probably say it much better than I can. I've flipped it already, but neonatal encephalopathy. I think that's right.
Neonatal encephalopathy. Yep.
Yes. And so, and we explained what it is, but just give me a brief synopsis of how it hit you and how it affected your family.
Yeah. There was no warning. Things just sort of went from being fine to not being fine very quickly, and it resulted in things moving very fast, a lot of words being thrown at you, and just at at the end, me standing in the hallway just waiting to figure out what was happening with my wife and my son. So it was a whirlwind. There was a lot of things, and then next thing I knew, my son was being rushed off to the NICU to receive care immediately after his birth due to the complications that were experienced during his delivery.
Mm-hmm. And how many years ago was it? And based on what you're telling me, it's something that you didn't find out until after he was born.
Correct. Yeah. So my son was born in March of 2003. And it wasn't until he was in the NICU fighting for his life that I got the words to explain what was going on. And it wasn't until his death that I got a deeper explanation and understanding of what actually happened. So, yeah, so in the span of about 13 and a half hours, we went from experiencing joy to the worst possible grief you can imagine.
Okay. And so, when did you realize this wasn't just kind of a medical crisis, but an emotional and a systemic one as well?
It took me a good bit of time to really realize that there were systemic things at play in that in that moment of us being in the hospital and going through delivery. I didn't think much of what was happening around us, but looking back at it, there's definitely things that happen along our journey from conception to delivery that I feel were sort of glazed over, and you were kind of put in a position where you were ill-informed because the system didn't want you to know that these things were a reality. But once things crumble and things start to fall apart, doctors start throwing words at you like these things just happen sometimes, and we don't know why. And so, in the months and years that followed this happening, I started to reflect on the fact that when I started asking questions, that was the first thing that these doctors threw at me. that, oh, sometimes these things happen. But when we were preparing for delivery and going through all of the recommended birthing classes and
Hmm.
pregnancy education courses, no one talked about the fact that you can make it past miscarriage and still lose your child. No one talked about
Mm.
going full term and losing your child. It was really, once you're past the miscarriage window, everything is okay. You're in the clear. They never once kind of shared that there are still risks um, in pregnancy, and as a going through that as a first time parent, you kind of take everything they say as gospel, and you don't question anything. So it's like, okay, they said once you're past the miscarriage window or the ectopic pregnancy window, there's nothing to worry about. So we're in the clear. Let's just go and figure it out. And then whenever the baby comes, and that really wasn't the case for us. We found out the hard way that there are alternative endings, and this particular ending was not something that we were coached on, prepared for, or even educated on in that matter, to be able to handle it. And so I think probably about a year or so after um, my son passed, I kind of again went back to those words and was like, something's wrong here. You can't sit here and say to someone these things just happen sometimes
Mm.
if you don't know that there's something systemically wrong with this process. Um, and so I started digging and started asking questions, and one thing led to another, and I decided to start the foundation.
Yes, yes, and we'll definitely get to that because I think that's very important. So, um, were you actually in the delivery room, and then because you can kind of pick up on things. Did the doctors give any indication based on either their body language or look that there was a problem?
No, they really tried to make everything seem like it was routine, like these things just happen sometimes. And so, kind of looking back at the entire situation, I have a lot more questions now than I did in that moment. Like there were moments where my son's heart rate dropped, and they just kind of turned my wife and was like, "Oh, everything is fine." Um,
Mm.
when in reality, like clearly things weren't fine because look at how it ended. But they waited a very long time and tried to, um, how do I explain this? Yeah, they just kind of waited a very long time and was like, "Oh, well, she's not dilated," but like her contractions were very strong, and they were going for days. So like, regardless of whether she's dilated or not, there's something you can do to help this process along. And at no turn did anyone ever say maybe we should do this. Maybe we should alter, the plan that you initially set out for how you want to deliver your baby because these things are happening. They were just like, oh, it's fine, just go home, it's okay. And then when we finally got to the hospital, and we saw his heart rate drop a couple of times throughout the, call it, 6 hours or so that we were there. Um, no one ever, no one ever said anything. No one ever really indicated that it was like, hey, this is like life or death. Like you should probably do these things.
Mm. Sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yep.
So then, since we're talking about, I guess, silence or not getting supported, when did it get to the point where you felt people were expecting, I guess, you to be strong, and where you didn't get supported? Because I know probably in this indication, they would definitely turn to the mom, for support and care?
I mean, yeah. The moment where it seemed like they were looking for my strength, and me to kind of hold it together and gather all this information and be able to share it out with the family was essentially after, they had put my wife under, and delivered the baby and rushed the baby off to the NICU. There were multiple people that came on and started spitting information at me and was just like, this is what's happening and so on and so forth. But, everything kind of went blank once I saw my son rolled past me in an incubator and they were like running. They were like running, not walking, not moving briskly. Like my son was in this container and they were running down the hallway with him. So like everything that was said after that was like a blur, but like these people were talking to me, trying to say all of these things about what happened and everything was going to be fine. But like none of that turned out to be true.
And when you say put under, she was actually sedated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they did an emergency C-section on my wife, as a result of my son's heart rate dropping really low.
I see.
At the very last moment. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so you had mentioned that you had, I guess afterwards, you had really more questions than you did immediately after. So looking back, what were kind of some of those questions? And I guess in hindsight, where did kind of the medical system fall short? And not really in the treatment, because it's something that happened suddenly and it's not something they thought would happen.
They kind of did fall short in that treatment plan, because if there was a risk that this would happen, you should probably take action sooner. You should probably say, hey, let's move forward with a C-section, because this is what's happening and we don't trust that this isn't going to end in this particular situation. But no one wanted to bring that up.
Okay, so there was a possibility, or based on what the checkups that you have like frequently right before the delivery, there was something that they could have picked up on.
I don't think there was anything that they could have picked up on before, because it was a normal pregnancy. There's no issues, but there were definitely. My wife went 41 weeks with this particular pregnancy.
41 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. So like, maybe you should have delivered earlier. Maybe you should have induced her at 40 weeks. Maybe,
which is the normal time.
Right. Maybe you should have, had a conversation with us while we were sitting in the hospital for 6 hours and you saw the heart rate drop. The couple of times that y'all came in and did what y'all did and actually said, hey, we're going to move forward with trying to deliver the baby sooner rather than later because this is happening. There are a number of opportunities for somebody to step in and say, hey, let's move things along because they're not moving as quickly as we need them to naturally, right? But then, kind of going back to the other part of the question, you were saying here, like, where were like the additional questions, where they come from, and all that stuff. Like, in the moment, I couldn't really think of anything other than trying to support my wife and support my son. But after everything kind of happened and things were said and done, I just kind of go back to, why did they wait so long? Why did no one say that this was a risk? Why? Just why didn't people take action? Right? My wife and I went back and forth for days saying, hey, she's having contractions in the time frame that you said we should come to the hospital. She's not sleeping. Like, this is going on for days. And they were like, oh, you're not dilated, so just come back later. And it was like, why didn't y'all take action? Like, there were signs. There absolutely were signs that you should have seen that said, I should take an intervention here. But no one ever stepped in and said, let me intervene. Let me assist this family in ensuring that their child is delivered safely and healthy. You know.
And I know we'll talk a little bit more about the foundation, but since you described that in detail, do you find that the families that you help have some of those same challenges, that no one told them of the risk or took action sooner?
Yeah, a lot of the people we've talked to and families that we've supported kind of share very similar sentiments of delayed intervention, not being informed that these things were a risk, and it ultimately ends poorly for them, right? Where we have to bury a child, and it's not a good feeling, and it's unfortunate, but this is constantly happening, right? You know, and it's not just like you gave a statistic earlier of, you know, how many people are impacted by neonatal encephalopathy annually, right? You know, that 9 in 1,000 number, it's real, and it's not a small feat, right? When you think about that, that's millions of people impacted by this, whose children either die immediately or end up with lifelong debilitating issues, you know, that they can't really recover from. And so it's just, you'd think that someone would talk about this, right? The same way we talk about childhood cancer, the same way we talk about the other elements that impact children. Why are we not talking about this as an issue that we can potentially learn about, understand, and hopefully prevent?
And I guess in your quest to get answers, what did doctors or administrators, what kind of feedback or answers did they give you about why more wasn't being done?
There was no explanations given. They were just like, the basis of everything was, well, there was no indication that we needed to intervene until we intervened. And I question that logic, because there's, as a parent looking back at the sequence of events, I see multiple times that a doctor could have stepped in and said, hey, let me give you some information, right? Let me help you make a decision. Let me just anything to kind of speed the process along so that maybe this didn't have to happen. Right. But yeah, there were really no moments where anybody attempted to provide any real clarity. And like the biggest thing that I remember the doctor saying after everything happened was, you know, these things happen sometimes and we just don't know why. And I'm like, it's 2023. Millions of babies have died or been impacted by this disease, and you don't know why. Make that make sense.
Right. So when did you get to a point, or when did it get to the time, you know, after after your son's death where you needed support, but you didn't get it?
I mean, pretty much immediately. I fell apart. Like I was literally holding on by threads.
Mm,
Trying to support my wife and make sure the house was taken care of and just do all the things I needed to just kind of keep things going. But like I knew immediately that I needed help. You that that night plays on repeat, right? And when you have situations where you have that level of trauma playing over and over again, you get to a point where you just stop sleeping.
mm,
And when I sat back and realized that I'd been up for days, probably nodding off for 30 minutes here or there, I was like, yeah, something's not right. I'm not operating the way that I need to. And then I realized that, you know, I was looking for help through various coping mechanisms and not doing um, not functioning the way that I needed to because just things were just in a complete disarray. And so um, it just it just really wasn't there's nothing operating optimally during that time. I knew immediately that I needed help, and the rage build up, the lack of sleep, and the constant demands of the world moving on while
mm,
you are in the midst of this made it all very clear that I needed to stop and get help for myself.
mm. So what I'm hearing is when you had to break the news, I guess, to family, friends, or colleagues, no one actually saw you as a parent or as a father that had lost a child. And how did you feel about that?
I'll, I won't say that no one saw me as a parent or father, but I was the harbinger of bad news. Um, and in most cases, everyone immediately was like, "How is your wife?" That was
Mm,
pretty much everyone's immediate response, and I'm like, "Yo, I'm the one telling you that this happened. You gonna ask about me?"
mm,
And for most people, it didn't register that they needed to ask about me because I'm I'm on autopilot right now. Like I'm literally in crisis management mode. After spending years in the military, you know how to handle a crisis, and so I'm on autopilot, right? And so I'm like, okay, I need to call these people to set up the handling of the body, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I'm like, I need all these things are going through my head about tasks that need to be completed, and so I've done pretty much everything, and informing family is taking place, and yeah, had to talk to my job and family, friends, all that stuff, and you know, just people don't really know how to say the right things in those moments, and so there was a lot of that. And then like I said, there was just a lot of people just immediately asking about how my wife was doing, and that kind of struck a nerve, um,
mhm.
and ultimately put me in a position where um, I don't speak to a lot of people today because of that situation, um, and the fact that no one really considered how I was doing in those moments. or really offering any support for me in those moments. Yep.
Sorry to hear that. That's awful, but I think that is sometimes often the case, and I guess the reason why sharing your story is so important on today's show. But because of the challenge and that you were not seen, it's almost as if you were invisible. How did that challenge teach you about kind of manhood and then your strength and vulnerability?
It's a pretty interesting question. Because I've never really thought about how this taught me about manhood and vulnerability, but kind of looking back at it, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some lessons that can be learned there, like um, what people tend to perceive as strength and masculinity doesn't always um, add up to what true strength and masculinity looks like. And so in this situation, I learned that one, it is important to be clear with people about what you actually need, right? As
Mm,
as a group, men tend to not really know how to fully express and embrace their emotional state. And one of the things I learned in therapy is that men men tend to have a much easier time expressing anger than anything else. And so while the outward emotional expression may come off as anger,
mhm,
there's usually something much deeper that's much harder to explain.
mm,
And so it really took some time for me to kind of put words to what I was feeling. Like there's so many chaotic emotions swirling all at once. And like it just feels like a ball of rage.
mhm,
But once you sit down and you look beyond the rage itself,
mhm,
there's like I said, there's something deeper. And so what I found behind the rage was sadness, was like this heavy emotional loss, like um this feeling of loss of identity,
mm,
loss of like futures that would never come through, right? You
mhm,
when you find out that you're pregnant, you may not think about it immediately, but you immediately start planning like what life will look like. You start having ideas about the things you can do, the activities that can take place. And so when you lose a child,
and that's as a
you're
father you're talking
as a
about.
father, yeah,
Mhm,
you start to mourn all of those individual losses. I was like, okay, I have a son. This is gonna be great. Like I can raise a son in a way that I was never able to be raised, right?
mm,
Having this hands-on experience where you show love, you show compassion, you show emotion, like you are there to say look, something other than boys don't cry, and you kind of you embrace all of what it means to be a father
mhm,
in this day and age, where you teach your son to be emotionally intelligent and you
mm,
teach
mhm,
your son how to do all these things. Like I looked forward to being able to have those conversations, teaching my son how to be in touch with his emotions and understand that that doesn't mean that you are less of a man because you are able to express yourself emotionally and you can understand what's happening with your partner and so on and so forth. And, you know, grieving all of that was hard because, you didn't really think about those things like as individual things. You were just like, oh, this is just what my life is going to
Mhm.
be like. And then when that life doesn't come to fruition, you're sitting here and you're questioning everything. Was what I was taught wrong? You clearly don't just get pregnant and have a baby and everything works out fine. Like there's clearly an alternative. So like, is everything else false in your life? Is there an illusion, of success and grandeur that everyone is operating under that only a handful of people are able to see through because they've gone through all of these things? Like there's
Mhm.
so many things that are being questioned about the reality that you live after going through something like that, and that causes an immense amount of pain. And every person goes through grief in their own unique way, and then some people relive these moments of grief over and over again, and it never really goes away. Like, and then having to deal with people saying, I'm trying to think of another word, having people say, um, essentially inappropriate things, only adds to the pain that you're feeling, right? When people just say things for the sake of saying things, because for some reason, as a society, we struggle with the concept that silence might be the
Mhm.
answer.
And
Like,
I
you
hate
don't,
to jump
yeah,
to and if you don't want to say it's fine, but what would be something that would be inappropriate?
you know, um, one of the things that I really struggled with after losing my son was people saying to me, "Oh, this was God's plan," or
Mm.
your son's in a better place, or um, you know, you'll get over it. You can have more kids. Like the
Mm.
while each of those things may seem like something that's appropriate to say, you have no idea what a person is going through.
Mm.
So it's important to just sometimes just listen, just be an ear for them instead of just putting your own thoughts and beliefs out there because they often come off as very insensitive,
Mhm.
right? For you to tell me that it was God's plan to take a baby when you have all of these people doing wrong out here in the world, it's kind of a slap in the face.
Mhm.
What did my child do to deserve to not have a life to live? But these people are out here doing all the crazy things that they're doing and they're living to 80, 90 years old. That doesn't make any sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
So,
Right. Right. And so due to or based on your story, you made the choice for you and your wife to create or start the Andreas Foundation.
mhm.
So tell me why you decided to do that. Because I guess, yeah, just I don't want to say anything
Yeah,
else other than that, but I'd love to hear why you decided to do that and what is your primary focus.
yeah. I decided that I was going to start the foundation because people needed to be educated on what neonatal encephalopathy was. People needed to understand the implications of what this illness actually meant. Um, and families needed to be supported through this process. Um, but also beyond those, primary drivers, it was also I needed my son's passing to be able to help other people, right? If nothing else, hearing our story will help someone who is walking into an OB office and saying, "Hey, I'm pregnant for the first time," be educated on, "Hey, this illness, this disease exists, and I'm going to ask a question about it. I'm not going to
Mhm.
walk in uninformed and decide to say, hey, um, everything you say is 100% gold, and I'm not going to question
Mhm.
anything. And if you tell me, you know, there's no risk outside of the first 20 weeks, then I'll believe you. Like, no, like I want people to know that there are other risks that are out there, and it's important to know about them so you can
Mhm.
prevent them.
And since there may be parents that will listen, what are some of those things? Because I heard you say it's a disease. So give me some, give us some tips, or not tips, but give us some things that we don't necessarily know about it.
Yeah, so there are actually several different classifications of neonatal encephalopathy. The overall NE classification is essentially a broad class of things that happen in sort of infant neurological pathways that um, that classifies this particular state of consciousness, if you will,
Mm.
where the child is not having full brain function as a result of whatever traumas may have happened during delivery or shortly after delivery. And so there's a number of classifications, and each classification, really is defined by a number of different um, kind of breakdowns. Let me see. I didn't think to come up with all of the
Yeah, and
different things.
you don't have to go through it in detail, but I guess
Yeah,
some of the things that at least
yeah,
maybe first time parents would need to know, because I think the details not so much, but just some basic things that could be
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. So it's essentially neurological dysfunction, and it's broken down by different levels of severity. Um, and like I said, it has multiple classifications. So
Mhm.
it could be, you look at the kid and the kid is hyper alert, or has an irregular heartbeat, or um, has seizures. Maybe their
Mhm.
pupils are constricted, or um, they're lethargic. They don't have like a very strong latch or something of
Mhm.
that sort, or something more severe where um, they they don't have proper brain function, and their body starts to shut down.
Mhm.
Like there's so many different things
Mhm. But
that
there's
kind of go into
Mhm.
it. But
Mhm.
but but there's different types of NE,
Right.
right? And um, one of the main types of neonatal encephalopathy, or NE, is called hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which ultimately breaks down to the child not getting enough oxygen through delivery.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And is that something? that's almost something that can't be controlled during delivery.
There's nothing that anyone can do in this
Mm-hmm.
current state to prevent that. And
Right.
I want to be very clear for any women that may be listening. If this happens to you, this is not your fault. You did nothing, right?
Mhm.
This is just something that we don't have enough information on to understand what brings this on, why it happens, or how to prevent it from happening.
So your main mission is to, at least for parents or upcoming parents, to be aware that this could happen to you.
That it absolutely could happen.
Right.
But secondary to that, the next piece is really investing time and money into research to be able to say that we've done all we can to help determine early warning signs,
Mm-hmm.
and ways to potentially prevent it. Right? There's no reason in my mind
Mm-hmm.
that we can't figure out how to identify this as a risk early, and then put in measures to prevent it from happening.
Okay.
So that's ultimately my goal. It's a lofty goal, but I believe that is the beauty of sort of medical exploration and medical intervention and education,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to find the thing and solve it. Right? We've worked on things like addressing childhood cancers and cancers in adults and all of these other medical feats. Right? Think about the vaccines that people came up with during COVID, like almost instantly. Right? Like we have the capability to figure out what the problem is and hopefully solve it. And so it may not be within a year, but maybe in 15 years, we're like, hey, this is a warning sign for this. Like when we see this happen in every pregnancy, it usually leads to this. So that's our marker.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And education is one of the things, or that's one of the common gaps that you see as far as more research. What are some of the other gaps that you see in this, that most of the families are going through, that you're actually trying to fill as a foundation?
Yeah, I think there's a huge gap when it comes to offering targeted resources for parents, right? There are a number of organizations out there doing some great work, but when they say, "Hey, that we're offering family support," it's usually geared towards the mom and the mom's experience,
Mm.
and there's no intentional space made for the father.
Right.
And so,
I mean, and that's something that's very important, because this could, if it doesn't turn out well, where someone doesn't get the support they need, could affect the families or the relationships.
absolutely, and usually these things do. In my own research and my own experience, I've seen some numbers that were shared where it was like when a parent loses a child, whether it's a newborn or an 18-year-old, a lot of times those families end in divorce. More often than not, because like the two parents are experiencing these things in two different ways, and what one person needs and the other person needs are often very different.
Right.
But the people that they're asking these things of are also going through grief. So mom is asking for something from dad, dad is asking for something from mom, and no one's able to really communicate effectively about what they need and how to support each other, because they're both in their deep grief and unable to really help each other.
Gotcha. And that's the system, support that you're actually, and that's a very good point. Especially when you're And you lived it, the expectations for your wife to be able to lean on you, but then there's always that fine line out. Well, and I'm sure a lot of men was like, how can I lean on my wife because of she had a more of a traumatic experience than I had.
And that's the thing, right? And that is often the language that's used around losing a child, right? Losing an infant. But in reality, there's no more traumatic. In this particular sense, we both experienced something traumatic.
Mhm.
It was just in different ways. And so like
Different ways, right?
for the mother, there are physical things that took place
Mhm.
on top of the emotional. And for the
Right.
father, there's the emotional
Emotional.
piece, but there's also this helplessness because you had no control over
Mhm.
anything that was going on, and you couldn't help your wife through the pregnancy, right? Your body's not built to carry that child, but it doesn't mean that what you experience is any less traumatic than your wife. You just experienced two different traumas. And the problem with our society is we're so quick to compare
Mhm.
instead of seeing everything as we each had a unique experience that has altered our lives concurrently.
Mhm. Right. And so if there were like there were black fathers out there that are kind of trying to that have kind of suffered loss and trying to navigate it, especially quietly, and are suffering, what would you want them to know?
I want them to know they are not alone. There's a community of fathers out here that are talking about what it is they're going through at a very deep level. Um, and the door is always open to bring you into this space and allow you to share your experience and talk about what you're going through, and it's a no judgment zone. Um, that I want them to know that um, there are people out here willing to help you through your worst days. People that you can call on when you are having your worst moments, and um, that you don't have to go through this alone.
Mhm. Great, great. And I guess I kind of, and lastly, because there's another component in this, and it's the medical administrators, healthcare providers, and things of that nature. Um, what could they do to show up more for those parents that are navigating grief like this?
Um, for one aspect, um, really lean into teaching your staff how to be compassionate in these moments and to understand the little markers that you may have around your hospital, that indicate, loss, right? I remember they had this resource that came around and offered, um, like massages to my wife after delivery, and there was like a little raindrop on our door that was supposed to symbolize that we had a loss. And this person just walked in and was like, "Oh, where's the baby?" And it was like, why would you say that? There's a whole sign on the door that
Mm,
signals what happened, right? So really train your staff on what are the signals to indicate that someone has lost a child, so that people are more sensitive when they walk into the room and don't just,
mhm, mhm.
kind of say things that could potentially trigger other people. Um, I'd say, additionally, that they need to you need to build a system that doesn't just blanketly focus on money, right? I remember distinctly after um, we got home, um, we were in the hospital for 3 or 4 days. And then when we came home, probably 2 days after I got home, I immediately got a bill with my son's name on it.
Wow.
Right. So maybe put something in the system to say maybe we should delay sending this message of a payment being due or whatever the case is, or maybe talk to the insurance to make sure that all of those things are taken care of before you decide to contact me. Like anything other than 2 days after someone leaves the hospital having a bill show up in their deceased child's name. That would be a good start. Additionally to that, from an employer standpoint, I'd recommend employers actively look at how to provide comprehensive bereavement policies that allow people the actual time they need to pull themselves together to show back up to work um, after they've lost a child. It's a very different grief than losing a parent, losing a
Hmm.
grandparent, right?
Mm. Yeah.
You know, when you lose a child, you also lose your identity. Um,
Mm.
and it takes some time to build that back up. And so when a company says, "Hey, you have 5 days, you have 10 days of bereavement," that's not that's not helping anybody because now I'm trying to rush to pull my life together after the worst possible experience ever. And yeah, 5 days, 10 days, it's not enough.
I don't know.
I came back to work early. Um, and then I still had to go out and take disability leave because I just was not ready to
Couldn't
go
do
back
it.
to work, and
Hmm.
so um, you you have to build systems that support people, and I feel like no at no turn are there truly systems in place that look at the full situation instead of looking at, oh, this person owes me money, or I have to pay them a salary, so they need to be at work, or um, any of those types of things. Like it's always about the money. Are you going to work? Are you going to pay this bill?
Mm.
It's never about the person. And so I encourage all of the systems out there to think about the people behind the message you're sending.
Yeah, that would be a great, I guess, cause for the foundation to get changed because that's a very important.
Yep.
But with with this show is there's, I guess, if you want to say triumph, but there is resiliency, which you have done by being able to tell your story today. So, kind of as a final question, how did you get through it and to be able to move forward, to be able to even to tell your story today? And ultimately, what was the process like?
How did I get through it to be able to tell my story? Um, I'm still figuring that out, right? Um, we are at a point now where I have shared this story a number of times. Um, and I think, what is this now? Just about 3 years later, I'm finally at a point where I can tell this story and not cry.
Mm.
So um, every time I've told the story before today, I've shed tears and have been okay with shedding tears while talking about this story because it's something that is important to talk about. I found in my healing process that I needed to say my son's name, that I needed to talk about what we went through, that I needed to be able to convey to the world that Andreas was here. Andreas's life meant something. And that regardless of whether you can see my child or not, I'm still a father. And so it was important for me to be able to talk about this experience, even with the pain, and be able to hopefully impact somebody else's life, to be able to come out of hiding and say, you know what, I lost a child too. You're not alone.
Yes. Well, Ryan, I feel blessed that you were able to tell your story on our platform today. And I think it will resonate with people, especially fathers who have lost children in whatever capacity, but have been able to process grief for, I guess, because of the expectations that they had to hold it in or be strong for everyone else. So I thank you for the time today. And it's great how paths cross, because we didn't know each other and we just happened to meet on another podcast. And I felt this was a story that needed to be told. And so I'm glad
Absolutely.
you're able to tell your story today.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you. And you have a great night. Hold on.
You too.
So welcome. Thank you for being on the Black Men Speak podcast, which we highlight ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. And today was truly extraordinary, to being able to share grief, not just for himself, but for others. And so if you are, this is your first time listening to the show, we're on all major platforms, so please go back and listen. We also have a Patreon account if you feel these stories and more need to be told. So thank you and have a great night.